Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome back to our Accessibility Adventure series. It is April, if you can believe that. We have been on this journey together for the last several months since December, and we are excited to just expand about some of the topics that we've already briefly explored. We're going to dive a little bit deeper in today's session. So you are here for Accessibility Adventure, unlocking learning for all in the digital classroom. This is level one engagement plus. So we've already talked about our level one engagement, but this is taking it to a little bit higher level. So if you did not see our level one when we first aired it a couple months ago, we have a recording for you that you can go back and watch. We'll share that link in just a second. But we're going to cover some of the same things that we covered, but we're going to take it a step further. And hopefully you'll leave with some practical ways that you can make accessible and inclusive learning opportunities that won't stress you out with difficulty or anything. We're going to try and make it as easy as possible for you. So, welcome, welcome. My name is John Pauls. I am a learning experience designer and professor in Jacksonville, Florida. And I am joined by the fabulous Kristen Harrington, who's a virtual learning coordinator and author with Fiddlers. And we both are partners with the Northwest Council for Computer Education, which is the premier learning organization for professional development for faculty, for teachers, for school systems. We have an amazing conference every single year where educators get together and talk about innovation and how to best meet our students' needs. We are here to help learn, lead, and innovate. And so if you or your school system needs professional learning or in-school coaching, or maybe you just need a thought partner when it comes to emerging technology, please visit www.ncce.org and reach out and let us know how we can support. We have a whole team of nationwide professional learning specialists with specialties in all different kinds of areas that are here to help meet those needs. So don't be afraid, reach out, ncce.org. So, welcome. As always, in our accessibility adventure, we always want to start by framing our conversation. Why are we here and why does this matter? It matters because accessibility is important. Accessibility takes intentional effort, and providing access is always going to be worth the investment. So we're here to hopefully help show you that it's not as intensive as it may seem, and how it's super important to meet our students' needs. Because together we're going to explore how we provide access to all in our own work and in our own worlds. You are here April 3rd, and we are doing Engagement Plus. We will also be back May 8th, 7 to 8 Eastern, same time, same place, where we will do Representation Plus. And then our final time together will be June 5th this year, where we will talk about Action and Expression Plus. So we will dig deeper into those UDL guidelines, and we'll leave you with some practical application. If you want to go back and watch any of our recorded videos or sessions that you might have missed, visit t.ly/_V y 52, or you can scan the QR code if you're watching this at home. That will take you to, that will take you to our database where we have our recordings, and you can catch up on what you may have missed, or you can just come next month and continue the conversation, whatever works for you. Now, this time we're going to be talking about engagement in the classroom, right? Engagement opportunities, they are all around us. They're in our classrooms, they're in our lives. And so how can we make sure that all of our students are engaged? We're going to expand this whole concept of engagement and hopefully expand our collective understanding about how we can be engaging for all. Engagement is the extent to which students participate in academic and non-academic activities, how they show commitment and identification with educational goals. It involves their effort, persistence, emotional investment, and connection with the educational environment. And we do have some words that are highlighted on the screen, extent to which students participate. So engagement sometimes seems like participation, and how they show commitment to their learning. That's engagement. And how they identify their goals. That's engagement. It all encompasses their effort, their persistence, their investment, how they show up in our classes. And we can help them show up more authentically if we structure our learning design specifically. Engagement is multi-dimensional, so it's not just one aspect of the classroom. It's not just doing, an exit ticket. It's not just asking for a poll. There are so many levels to engagement, and engagement can look different in people's classrooms. So how you see engagement it could be completely valid for your classroom, but hopefully you can get some other strategies as well just to put in your toolbox because our students are all different. Engagement is inclusive. So if 50% of your class is engaged by your instructional strategies and the other 50% are not engaged due to whatever reason, we're not getting everybody when we cast that net. And so we want engagement and our practices to be as inclusive as possible. Engagement is also malleable. So whether you have this one strategy that worked this one year with these one students, the next year it might be completely different, and that may not work to engage your learners. So having that toolbox of tools and strategies just helps us show up and be more prepared to meet all of our students' needs. And engagement can come from a variety of antecedents. So engagement could come from you asking your students to raise their hands to a question. Engagement could look like one of your students independently grabbing a book of interest off of your bookshelf and then coming to you with follow-up questions. It could be caused by a lot of different things, but whatever causes the engagement, we want to be specific about how we structure it, and we want to foster that engagement so that we can get more of it. And this is where we really tie in our universal design for learning framework. And if this is your first session with us, Universal Design for Learning Framework is our guidelines that are a tool that is used in the implementation of Universal Design for Learning, which is a framework developed by CAST to improve and optimize teaching and learning for all people, based on scientific insights into how humans learn. So the UDL framework and the guidelines, they are all based on science, and they're designed to provide as much inclusion, support, and access to all of our students. And these guidelines are split up between three different areas. We've got the design multiple means of engagement. That's what we're talking about tonight. And then there's also designing multiple means of representation, and then designing multiple means of action and expression. Tonight, we're going to focus on the engagement. You can view the entire guidelines at https://udlguidelines.cast.org. And we are doing the plus version of engagement. In our previous session, we talked about some strategies. We talked about some ways that we can engage learners, and we really went over a broad scope of the designing multiple means of engagement. But here we're going to take it a step further tonight. With advancement in artificial intelligence, with a need for AI literacy in all of our worlds, we found it was really important that we could demonstrate how easy it can be to design these experiences with the help of artificial intelligence. But before we do this, we want to make sure that we set some parameters when it comes to AI use, because we all want to be responsible. So we have a little AI literacy primer before we dig in. We want you to remember that AI is not always accurate. The data fed into AI via our prompts can be used to train the algorithm. That means we don't want to put any proprietary information in. We don't want to put student names in. We want to be as safe as possible with our data, our students' data, and then the resources we have in our classes. AI data can show bias. This just means we have to look at the output with a keen eye and evaluate, is it representative of our students and their shared experiences? Never put identifiable information into AI. Start and end any AI process with your own humanity. So we'll prompt it, we'll get the output, but then we're also going to evaluate it because we are the experts when it comes to teaching and learning. And so we can use it as a tool, but we always want to make sure that we are starting and ending the AI process. And it's important that we also model our own AI literacy for our learners. I am hoping that we're modeling some AI literacy with you tonight because we're showing you some different considerations when it comes to AI. We're modeling how it's used. And you can do this in your classroom as well. You can cite AI use in your practices. You can be open and transparent with your students and show them responsible ways to use this tool. So in this case, thought it would be really beneficial. Some of the things that I hear in my own practice when I work with faculty and teachers when it comes to accessibility and inclusivity is time, it's resources, there's so much to learn. How am I supposed to do all of this in my class? How am I supposed to get this all done? And I think that we need to reframe that conversation. We need to see how can we just build these experiences from scratch in everything that we do. Unfortunately, we're not always going to get every single student we want to, but I could put in some kind of accommodation for a learner that would be perfect for Susie, but that same accommodation might be horrible for Bobby. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's just building that toolbox. And so I thought that we could show you how we could take this UDL, these guidelines, and ask and collaborate with AI to get some ideas. So for the first area within our guidelines, it is welcoming interests and identities. We can make learning more accessible and inclusive if we welcome the interests and identities of others when it comes to our engagement. And so we have all of these different things that we consider: optimizing choice and autonomy, optimizing relevance, voice and autonomy, foster collaboration, interdependence, and collective learning, foster belonging and community, and offer action-oriented feedback. I'm just going to take that first area and we're going to take it from each level so we can see what AI suggests and how you can use this as a tool. So the prompt that I developed, given optimizing choice and autonomy when it comes to engagement, was this. I'm facilitating a lesson for fifth grade students on the scientific method. What are some ways I can optimize choice and autonomy in this lesson? So I'm taking it straight from the UDL guidelines, I'm framing it into my prompt, and now we can see what AI says. These were 4 of the 12 suggestions that it gave me when I was doing this activity. So it gives you a plethora. And I thought that these were really, really great ways to design multiple means of engagement. So I chose to highlight these 4, but feel free to explore on your own. But the output said, and this is verbatim from Copilot, that's what I use, Microsoft Copilot. Number 1 is choice and experiments when we're learning the scientific method. Allow the students to choose from a list of experiments related to the scientific method. It gives them a sense of ownership and lets them explore topics that interest them. We know providing choice is fantastic for including all learners. And so finding an opportunity for choice, I definitely agree with that. Then it says flexible grouping. Let the students decide whether they want to work individually, in pairs, or in small groups. This can help them feel more comfortable and engaged in the learning process. I'm a big fan of this. I was not the learner that likes group projects, even though I had to participate in them. My brain works a little bit differently. And so having that flexibility when it comes to how our students show up and engage will foster more engagement. Just because a student may want to work alone does not mean they won't be engaged in the process. It could just mean that having others working with them would detract from their engagement. Knowing your learners is key. Number 3, student-generated questions when it comes to the scientific method. Encouraging students to come up with their own questions to investigate using the scientific method. This fosters curiosity and makes the learning experience more personal and meaningful. So I love that idea because that's telling our students, if you see something out in the corridors, if you see something in your community, question what, question why, and then we can use the scientific method to investigate that. And so I think that that's a fantastic idea for student-generated questions, and I'm sure they would probably be more engaged with that ownership that they design those questions. And then multiple presentation formats. We know that that's a big one in creating inclusive and accessible learning opportunities is varying how we present content. So I may have a text, I may have a podcast, I may have videos, but the different kinds of presentation modalities is just going to help me meet more learners' needs. And so according to Copilot, offer various ways for students to present their findings, such as posters, slideshows, videos, or written reports. This allows them to choose a format that suits their strengths and preferences. I love that idea. And one of the things that I always talk about with educators is if you are not analyzing, measuring, and evaluating the act of public speaking, which you're focusing on content, then vary the method. Always go back to what your core learning objectives were. What are you trying to analyze, and how can you provide as much choice and freedom and options with that learning objective in mind? And then we can move on to sustaining effort and persistence. How do we do that for every single learner in our classroom? And I went ahead and I took the very first option, which is clarify meaning and the purpose of those goals. That will help them sustain effort and persist with your instructional activities. So I asked in the same conversation with Copilot, continuing on, how can I clarify meaning and purpose of the goals in the same lesson? This is what Copilot said. Explicitly state the goals. Articulate those goals of the lesson at the very beginning and explain what the students will learn and why it's important. Use simple, student-friendly language. I love this. We know that we love stating what the outcome is supposed to be so our students know where they're headed. Number two, use visual aids, display the goals visually in the classroom, such on posters or slides. This reinforces the goals and keeps them visible throughout the lesson. In my classroom in K through 5, I was in a self-contained classroom, and my students, whenever they did some computer-based instruction that was just supplemental, they had their own little progress trackers. And at the end of every lesson, I'd give them a marker and I say, okay, let's track your progress. And we made a little activity that they could see, I am making progress, I'm working towards a goal. And it helped to really bring those goals home. Number three, provide examples. Show examples of what successful achievement of the goals looks like. This gives students a clear picture of what they are working towards. I love having examples and non-examples because it just adds another dimension of what is expected. And if you're saying, John, I don't have time to make non-examples, there are AI generators. Magic School AI actually has a great exemplar generator where you can type in the activity and it'll provide you with artifacts that you could use to show an example of appropriate response and maybe not so much of an appropriate response. And celebrate achievements. Goodness knows we want our students to know that we are proud of them, that we are honoring their hard work. Celebrate the students when they reach their goals. Recognize their efforts and successes to reinforce the importance of those goals. So often that little interaction with all of our students, I am proud of you for X, Y, and Z. My son is disabled himself, and so I always tell him, it may look very small to other people, but no matter what it is, we are celebrating everything because everything is a celebration when you look at it through that lens. And so find whatever it is that makes that student shine. Maybe it was not giving up. Maybe it was persisting to the end of that test. Maybe it was just making a decision on which choice of activity they wanted to do. Know your students and find a way to celebrate them so that they get that intrinsic motivation to pursue those goals. And then our next area, building emotional capacity. This is in our designing multiple means of engagement under UDL. And the first area, it says recognize expectations, beliefs, and motivation. In that same conversation with Copilot, I continued. I said, how can I recognize expectations, beliefs, and motivations of my learners in this lesson? Let's see what Copilot said. Surveys and questionnaires. We could gather information about students' interests, beliefs, and expectations. This can provide valuable insights into what motivates them. I always like to start out my classes at the beginning of every semester with a sort of personal inventory for my students and my learners. I want to know who they are. I want to know more about them so that I can really help support them on their own individual goals. And I'm sure all of you do the same exact thing in your classes as well. But really taking time to intentionally think about what information I can get from my student that is going to really help me meet their needs as far as their own beliefs and expectations and motivation. Reflective journals. Ask students to keep reflective journals where they can write about their experiences, thoughts, and feelings related to the lesson. This can provide deeper insights into their motivations and beliefs. Now, we know that with adults, reflection is really one of the best ways for adults to learn, but it's also super important for students and children to really build their own emotional capacity. They have to have space to say, this is how I'm feeling, this is why I'm feeling it, and really put it on paper or even a digital journal. But having that documentation of really understanding where our students' brains are at, especially in 2025, is invaluable. If you want them to be engaged, they have to feel safe. They have to feel seen. They have to feel heard. And so we really need to make sure that we give them a space to really express themselves that is safe and that is protected from everybody else, but maybe it's just a private thing between you and them. But give them that space to reflect. I think that it's needed for everybody nowadays. Positive reinforcement. Use positive reinforcement to acknowledge students' efforts and achievements. This can boost their confidence and motivation. I am sure a lot of you use positive reinforcement already. Whether you use a token economy in your classes like I did, and students get little tokens for all the positive actions and then they can cash it in for a reward, or whether it's just doing a simple acknowledgement of fantastic job, Timmy. That is all example of positive reinforcement if it leads to an increase in that behavior that we're wanting to see. So think about that positive reinforcement and how we can also encourage and reinforce their emotional capacity, and really just use that strategically. And then finally, cultural sensitivity in this area. Being culturally sensitive and aware of the diverse backgrounds of your students, this helps in understanding their beliefs and expectations more accurately. And I cannot speak more about this specific aspect as well. We are so diverse in our world. There are so many different types of learners, families, communities, and belief systems. And we want to focus on teaching our students. But we also want to just acknowledge that shared experience as humans, but also the diversity of experience as diverse humans. And so if you can learn more about an individual's cultures and beliefs, we can be a little bit more sensitive to make sure that we are, again, including everybody and making learning accessible. For instance, specific religions may observe fasting in their practices throughout the time of the year. Knowing that and understanding when students might go through a fasting process could indicate that I should probably avoid maybe some strenuous activities on those days, or maybe I should be more cognizant about not having a special pizza party on that day. Just having that awareness that there are other lived experiences and we can still support them as much as we can as educators is going to help the engagement as well. If our students feel seen and they feel represented, they will be more likely to engage in our practices. Now, we do this every time that we meet. It's something kind of fun because I know a little bit of stuff. We all know a little bit of stuff, but together we know a lot of stuff. And so this is our NCCE Community Collective. I would love for you to scan this QR code, and you do not have to contribute to this now. You can also visit t.ly/GQ8NI. And this will take you to a shared Canva document where you can go in and give us your own ideas when it comes to engagement. If you have a specific strategy in your class that you use that you're like, this is what I swear by, we would love to see that in this shared document. So when you have time tonight or after our call, whenever, go ahead and click that URL, access the document, and let us know what works for you in your class. We can all add it to our own tool belt and our toolbox. Now, we talked a lot about engagement, how we can make learning more accessible and in the engaging aspects of our classroom more accessible and inclusive. And we used artificial intelligence to help generate some ideas. Remember, AI can be a thought partner for you. So if you want to go continue that conversation, go to your favorite AI tool and ask it about engagement and the universal design for learning principles, and ask it based, this is how my class operates right now. What could I do to better meet the needs of my learners? And just see what it says. You don't have to take what it says, but it does provide a nice thought partner. Well, we talked about engagement, but now we're going to pivot a little bit on our accessibility adventure, the road to success, and we are going to talk about very specific strategies that we can use when it comes to our digital content that's going to make it more accessible for everybody. So I'm going to head and stop talking, and I'm going to pass it over to Kristen, and she's going to take us from here on our journey.
Thanks, John. I loved seeing what you did with AI. That was awesome. For a second, I thought you were actually going to go out to Copilot, but I love how you had already pre-prepared. So it was really nice to see the examples that it gave. So we're jumping in, yes, to more detailed accessibility here. And this is where UDL and WCAG, which is something we've been talking about, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, throughout this year. If you're new to this series, please, we encourage you to go back and rewatch all of our webinars. But even if you're just jumping in today, we're going to learn something new and specific. So you will be just fine. So we see here on this slide, there are two road signs. One is accessible learning and the other is flexible learning. And that accessible learning leads on a road to the WCAG standards. Flexible learning leads to the Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. And where both of these are the same is that in both of these, UDL and WCAG, we are anticipating the needs of our students. So it's a little different than when we think of assistive technology, we're designing or finding tools or strategies that are specific to that child. Whereas with these two, we're going to anticipate who's walking into our classroom and have everything ready for them. Both are needed, both are important, but that's where it differs from assistive technology. And we've been talking a little bit about a new rule, which came out, actually, it's been almost a year now. It was last April, and we're coming up on almost a year of preparing for this. But this is a very exciting, but maybe a little challenging rule that the Department of Justice launched for ADA, and it is the final rule for Title II, which basically in short term just means we are now going to be fully accessible for our students and have all those things in place, such as alt text, color contrast, really anything you can think of to try to meet the needs of our students. And that deadline is fast approaching for a lot of our districts, and that would be 386 days. We have a little over a year to prepare. I know NCCE is committed to helping with that in the future as well. And then again, please rewatch any of the webinars. I think you would be in very good shape if you've watched all of them and are starting to apply those in your classroom, school, or district. So where UD and WCAG meet, today John talked about engagement, and that is under engagement, there's guideline 1, which is providing options for recruiting interest, which he had some really good examples of AI for that. And we're going to dive in even deeper to this on that last not recommendation. What are they called, John? Consideration, which is minimize threats and distractions. I'm really bad with titles. So on this one, we have an activity for you, and you probably know where this is going, and which maybe you don't know the WCAG standard, but you can get an idea of what it is, but we're going to learn about that on the next slide. But I have a little challenge for you, which is to read this pretty short paragraph here, which is probably about something that might be unknown to you, maybe not. We're going to give you about a minute, 60 seconds to just read as much of this as you can, and then we're going to talk about how that went. And I'm going to try to be quiet for that minute. All right, so time is up. Those of you watching the recording, you're not allowed to pause. You get the same amount of time as everyone else. So looking at this, it's interesting. It just dawned on me that this actually fits one of the other WCAG standards, which is putting time limits on things, which can also create anxiety and lessen learning outcomes. But that's not the one we're talking about today. We're talking about distractions in the form of animations, and especially on automated animations. So I'm going to click through to show you what that standard is. It is SC 2.2.2, which is called pause, stop, hide. And it basically just says we don't want to have auto playing animations on our content, whether that's a website, a presentation, whatever that might be. We want to try to avoid that. And as an educator, I know sometimes I didn't really have access to maybe remove that if it was part of a video that was part of a textbook or other instructional materials that were purchased by the district. But just having that awareness that that's there for your students and knowing that that might create a challenge, even if you're not able to turn it off, will be helpful. But if it is in your control to turn those off or to remove them, that's what we want to try to do. So kind of think about your experience with trying to read that article. And we will probably see varied levels of success for different reasons. So we're going to talk about that a little more. So auto playing animations can be distracting, and they're overwhelming and distracting to anyone, but particularly for users with ADHD, cognitive disabilities, or visual impairments. And I want to add to that just situational challenges, such as being really tired or stressed about something and thinking about something else. So if you already have another distraction and we're adding something on top of that, So even your brightest student that is just so lucky to have really no neurodivergence and they're just that typical student, on a given day, this could be challenging for them, and really anyone. And then I want to point out one other thing, which is background knowledge. So some of you might have had more background knowledge about the topic in that paragraph, which might have made it a little easier to stay focused, even with that flashing animation. But others without background knowledge, it was probably extremely challenging. And we have another WCAG standard related to this one, which is 2.3.1. I just want to point out it is called 3 flashes or below. This probably doesn't typically apply to educators, but I found it really interesting where we don't want to have more than 3 flashes per second. And this is because this can actually cause seizures in some individuals, some that wouldn't even have known that that could have been an issue. It will just randomly happen. And interesting enough, I wasn't going to tell this story, but John, you happened to put AI in there today. So I actually, when I get stumped and I can't think of an activity for a topic that I'm going to do, I go to AI and I went to ChatGPT and I put in the standard and I was like, help me come up with an activity to do for this today. And what it came up with, which we are not going to do, and this shows why we have that humans in the loop with AI, as John so eloquently pointed out earlier, we want to make sure that we're really checking it because it's not always accurate or the ideas may not always be the best. So what AI today or earlier this month told me to do was to create animations to show and ask the users whether it was 3 flashes or more. I was like, no, we're not having seizures today on this call, so we will not be doing that. But this again shows why humans in the loop with AI is important. But it also illustrates why this standard is so important because we don't want to cause any unnecessary problems for anyone that we're presenting content to. So there will not be an activity for this one. And again, this just to summarize, use animation sparingly and only to help convey important information. And we want to avoid decorative animations or animations that can't be paused, stopped, or hidden by the user. So I have a couple examples here, and I want you in the chat to give a thumbs up if you think this is a good example. You don't have to give a thumbs down. You can just not post if you aren't so sure or don't think this is a good example. So this is a slide about graduation rates in no particular district, but showing how they have steadily increased since 2021. And then we have this, oh, it went way too fast. Okay, hold on, let me go back. This is the animation we're looking at. Oh, I don't know why it did that. Okay, so ignore the fireworks. We're just looking at that little arrow there. So what do we think about that arrow? Would that be a good use of animation to illustrate that graph? Having that little arrow shoot up to show that the graduation rates have risen. If you think that's a good use, go ahead and put that in the chat as a thumbs up. All right, and I am seeing some thumbs up. And yes, that would be a good use. And I kind of gave it away already, but I messed up my animations. So now we have these fireworks, which I think the district's probably just excited about the graduation rates rising. So we'll give them a little grace there. But what do we think? Is this a good use of animation to illustrate? No, it's definitely distracting. But you can see how very easily someone might use that, especially again if they're excited about their rates. But no one's really looking at that data because all they're looking at are the pretty fireworks because they're sparkly. And I have an example here that I can't even believe this really exists, but this is a real website just to show you how far we can go with animations and that we sometimes don't even notice it because we're so used to going on websites that throw us off. So just a quick example here. I'm going to play this to show you. This is a real website and what pops up as soon as you click on it. This is all that shows up. Yeah. Very difficult to watch. And I think it's a design firm too that's trying to show you all the things they can do. And then here's just one more example, just to give you an idea of when I always think of that Coco Chanel quote about, like, when you have everything on, take one thing off. And that's what they need to do here. It's like they're trying to show all the things they can do, but that's not effective. It doesn't help me understand even what they're trying to sell or trying to promote on this site. So those are just two examples of what we don't want to do. Even if we know how to do all the things, we don't want to do all the things all the time. So pick one and showcase that one. So everything we've been talking about so far on these two WCAG standards comes down to something called cognitive load theory, or cognitive load, which is an instructional design theory. It refers to the mental effort required to process and learn new information. And it can be called cognitive overload when there is too much coming in. And it can happen to any of us. And it does. It happens to all of us probably almost every day. There's a point in time where we have cognitive overload for varying reasons. It's the reason why you've probably heard as educators, when you're teaching a new tool, like a new tech tool or a new program to students, you want to create a low risk environment when you first launch something new. So do something fun. That's a good time to do getting to know you, those kind of strategies that John talked about earlier for appreciating different cultures and learning about students' interests. Use the new tool for those things. You don't want to do a high risk academic content when you're also teaching a tool, because that's two things they're learning new, and that's going to create that overload. So how do we reduce cognitive load? Again, keep content simple and clear. Use visuals that support, not distract. No fireworks, unfortunately. And avoid unnecessary information, and break information into smaller steps. Those last two we're going to talk about more in the next webinar next month, because I'm going to really talk a lot about more instructional strategies for breaking content down and making it simpler. And that applies to students, but also some of the parents of your students as well. We're going to talk about a little bit. And the bottom line is just that less overload equals better learning. And sometimes if you've had opportunity to teach students that maybe picked up quickly or were able to overcome, we think it's okay then. We might think it's okay to go too fast or to have a little extra, but it really still isn't, because are they really working at their optimal level? They're not. But then when we do have students with disabilities in our classes, or with other challenges, or even those situational challenges we talked about, parents going through a divorce, a pet just died, whatever that might be, they're not able to learn at all. So when we have those situations, it's just not effective, and we need to constantly be thinking about what can we do to better meet their needs and eliminate those distractions. So just for fun, I tried to think of all things, and I went a little overboard because these are not all related to animations, but they are all related to digital distractions that we see every day in our lives. If you're on social media or looking at news online or videos, you are having these distractions. But today, you can only decide to remove one. So hypothetically, if you could take one of these challenges that are the most frustrating to you and remove it, in the chat, you're going to tell us which one you would remove. If you are online, we encourage you to reach out to us on social media and tell us with the hashtag IamNCCE. Let us know which one you would remove, because we do want to know. So number one is unexpected media that plays while trying to read content. This makes me think of articles. I'll click on like a new online newspaper and I want to read an article, and it auto pops up with a video. Number two is excessive or flashing ads on a website. Three is constant chatbot pop-ups. They want you to chat with them. Four is too many slide transitions, over the top animations. And I said between slides, but that could also be on video, transitions also. Number five is unnecessary sound effects or music. And number six, gimmicky themes. So out of all of these six, you can only pick one to remove from this world. Unfortunately, we can't really do it, but which one would you pick? Let's see what we got here. Oh, what? Okay, so I'm seeing three constant chatbot, but then I'm also seeing one unexpected media playing. But I bet you all have some more that you're still thinking about and dropping in there. And again, I wish I could remove all of these for you, but at least you can do it for your students, if nothing else. And we have one more topic to cover tonight, one more standard, which is WCAG 1.4.1, which deals with the use of color and specifically using text labels, symbols, or patterns in addition to color. So if you've joined us for some of our webinars, we've already talked about color contrast and having significant contrast in your between your text and your background, or between images in the background. We've learned that the best contrast you could have is black and white, which is why when we read novels, magazines, it's typically going to have that white background and black text. But this is a different use of color we're going to talk about. So I have a quick little review UDL activity here on this slide. In the bottom right corner is a color key, which has the three main UDL guidelines for engagement, representation, and action and expression. And I want you to think about in everything that John has been showing us and providing for us in all these webinars, which of these three do you feel like you need to work on the most? Would it be engagement, representation, or action and expression? I'm going to give you just about 10 seconds to think about that. All right, and we're going to dig in more to this color key. So if you said engagement, then you are going to, in this list of principles you're going to look at, or considerations, you're going to look for green, the green color. If you said representation, you're going to look for the blue. And if you said action and expression, you're going to look for the yellow. And I already see some confused faces looking at me. So go ahead and pick out one of those considerations in the category, in the guideline category you chose, that you want to work on this week or this month until our next webinar. And John is going to have you report back to him about this too. I'm going to make it even more challenging. Okay, so I won't make you do that too long. So the purpose of this is to show you when we use color for meaning that it is not accessible to everyone. So you just got a sense of someone with a certain type of color blindness, what they would see. So if you look at the key in the bottom right corner, it shows the colors correctly in green, blue, and yellow. But with the filter of color blindness on the list, you can see that these do not look the same at all. So go ahead and think of the one that you tried to pick, and I'm going to click to the next slide, and we're going to see how close we were. So for example, if you chose provide multiple tools for communication, you were probably really confused because it was pink, and pink's not on the list at all. But if you did, that actually was yellow for action and expression. Similarly, if you chose representation blue, or if you chose engagement green, you'll see that they kind of are switched. So sorry, let me go back to this one. So here, this to me is a slightly more green, more like a teal. So you might have said, I mean, they're both kind of blue. These are both blue, but I would have said this has more green in it. But really, they're flipped. So if you look here, it's the opposite. So it can be very challenging for someone with that. And there are so many different visual impairments and types of color blindness that individuals can have. And it is actually more common than we realize, especially in adults, but even in children, they might have this. And I know I can think about when I was younger and I heard someone said that they were colorblind. I was just like, oh, that's, oh, wow. But I didn't realize just how much that would affect them until I started thinking about this a little more deeply. So we're going to dig a little more into this. So here's one example that could be included in maybe a third grade textbook for science, or any kind of supplemental instructional materials that you might provide your students here. We have showing here three objects. One is boiling water, an ice cube, and room temperature water. And those are all the objects. And then in the second column, it has the temperature, and it has hot, cold, and warm. And it says hot is designated as red, cold as blue, and green is warm. So let's just pretend that there are even further a list with lots of different objects or types of matter, and it would label them according to color. Well, this is what it would look like. So for someone with red blind color blindness, that's what hot would look like, cold or warm. So nothing like what it really would look like. Down here, if they chose hot, that they could probably figure that one out. Warm, I would definitely not call that warm or cold. So we can really start to see the challenge. So then what do we do? Because it is really handy as a teacher to use color sometimes to categorize things or to highlight information for students. I know I love to do that, but there is a way to do it, which is by adding that color, but also adding symbols or patterns or other text features to highlight information. So in this example, we could actually put a little flame to represent hot. They actually went a step further and added the temperatures there, which also could be really helpful in a science lesson. For cold, we have the little snowflake, and then warm is that little thermometer there. So that is what we would want to do. And then the next one shows another information that could also be in a textbook or instructional material. And this is very similar. It's listing endangerment status for different animals. So for example, a bald eagle has the least concern with green. Sea turtle is threatened with yellow. And then critically endangered, which is the blue whale, the emperor leopard, those are both red. And this is what that would look like for someone with green blindness. So they all kind of look like a brownish, yellowy green. None of those colors show up. So just one more example of what we could do here is using symbols again. So using an X for critically endangered, a check mark for least concern, or that for threatened, we would use a little warning symbol. So it doesn't really matter what symbols you use, as long as you're being explicit with your students about what those are, and then just always trying to find another way to show meaning than other than color alone. So we can still use color, but you need to have something else there to show. And then this is important, again, not just for students, but also parents of your students. If you're sending information home, if you're sending home folders, for example, and saying, oh, the red folder goes home, that means this, blue folder means that, or highlighting their behavior every day on a chart with like green means a good day, yellow means you want to have another way to show that, even for parents who also may have some type of visual impairment. And that is all I have for today. I'm going to turn it back over to John.
Perfect. I always learn so much whenever we do these. Just because, like we were talking about earlier, there's so many different considerations. If you don't have exposure, like I don't know that I've ever seen the different levels of color blindness and seeing how it would be represented. And it's just like, wow, the more you know, it's like the shooting star. So grateful that you all are here learning with us. We are going to be back on May 8th, 7 to 8, where we are going to dig deeper into representation with UDL guidelines and then more tech tips and tricks on how to make sure everything's accessible with the WCAG. We do have that tiny URL that's got all of our recordings, so please make sure to go back and view those for us. And let's see, and I think this is our last slide. So yes, we will see you all on May 8th. Hopefully, tell your friends. Some of the best free PD around. Come and join us, have a nice conversation. And before you join us, check out that URL to catch up on what you may have missed. Thanks, everyone.